Make some noise for your host, Kid Copious.
It's your boy, Kid Copious, back in the bunker. Purple State Party is take number 2. I hacked up a lung on my first take. Yeah. Speaking of hacking up lungs, well, we know what's transpired recently. We had ourselves some sort of pretend election. Trying to adjust the lights here. I can't do it from here. Whoa, no, that's not the right way either. Whatever. We'll run dark. It's a dark day. So, yeah. We had a so-called election. We'll get into why I call it a so-called election. There's a lot of things to cover, you know. The most troubling of all of it, really, is illustrated by some of these posts right here. Bronco, and this one, oddly enough, is from 2016, talking about the same thing, talking about voter fraud. You know, I don't always vote, but when I do, I prefer Democrat. Stay stupid, my friends. Well, yeah, that about sums it up. Well, we're hearing all kinds of stories, and quite frankly, like, you know, with this whole mail-in thing, and we're going to get into why the mail-in thing was a bad idea to begin with, but first let's address why I think the Democrats pushed so hard for it. And that's because there was no enthusiasm to vote for Biden. That's just plain and simple. I never saw it. Nobody, the mainstream media is out there trying to sell us this guy, and they never showed us dramatic rallies. They made up the excuse that it was COVID. But you notice they just used this disease, They used whatever they could, just like when they try to impeach Trump. They use manufactured evidence. They'll use whatever they have to use because their policies are really flimsy to begin with. And, they got to use trickery because most people see right through them. Here we go. Fraud just going into the mailbox. I turned myself in 124,000 ballots in a swing state, Morty. I'm voter Rick. Voter fraud Rick, excuse me. Really dropped the ball on that one, didn't I? Whew. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to edit it. I screwed up. It's all on me. But yeah. If you didn't have the fortitude to vote in person or the foresight to get an absentee ballot, then you don't deserve to vote. Those have always been the rules. Either get an absentee ballot, which is, you request it and they mail it to you, or you show up and vote because, it's pretty hard for dead people to vote in mass. One or two people here and there, some irregularities with people using other people's credentials, whatever. But this year, they weren't even checking for ID at polling places. I don't see how they were able to determine whether somebody had mailed in a ballot, dropped off a ballot, or voted in person. Their machines were making mistakes. People are fallible. I don't think that with all the votes that were cast, anything was properly checked. That's just my opinion, I just don't really see how that's conceivable. That's a pretty big job. This election reminds me of that time security cameras stopped working the night Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. So very true. So very true. In the middle of the night, votes just showed up. Now, and I know that mail-in ballots were coming in late, so that's not the suspicious part. The suspicious part is that they were so lopsided, they didn't follow the trends. I know things were supposed to skew more for the Democrats on the mail-in ballots, but, to that degree, I don't think so. And, more dead people voting because they don't, they're on the voter rolls. And this one is not saying that they actually voted. They're not claiming that, but they were on the rolls. And that shows you the problem with the mail-in system. The mail-in system, those 21,000 people would not be able to vote in person. They're dead. But if they were mailed ballots, that was a free-for-all. Anybody could have voted that way. This was a bad idea when it was announced. And this is exactly why, because how are we supposed to accept this? And since I mentioned it, if you don't cheat, you ain't a Democrat. Yeah, just like he said that about black people, right? If you vote for Trump, you ain't black. Remember, he's the asshole who said that. He's now supposedly our president. Somebody who says something that racist, he's now our president. We finally, at least now, at least for the time being, we at least have a racist president. We've been saying it for 4 years. At least now it's true. But I'll tell you why I'm suspicious, and see if this tracks with you. You know, I'm just offering my opinion here, but there was no blue wave. There was a blue trickle. They lost seats in the House. They had seats flipped on them in California. Also in California, this is probably not widely reported, and I hope I'm reaching enough people to make some sort of difference by putting this out there. But there were 4 ballot measures that all passed or failed, depending on which way it needed to go, that basically told Gavin Newsom and the state legislature, you're wrong, you're not doing that. And a good example is Prop 22. So Newsom says that Uber drivers and others, but I'm just going to say Uber drivers are employees. Well, the voters, including myself, we said no. They're independent contractors. They need that freedom. They're probably working as a second job. Their first job's probably giving them insurance. This is ridiculous. Overturned. They wanted to do rent control. We said no. So my point is that things didn't go too well across the board for Democrats. They didn't take the Senate. They lost ground in the House. And across the country, a lot of defund the police type measures and social issues failed. Here in California, they wanted to reinstate affirmative action, and we said no. So here in California, one of the most liberal places ever said no to affirmative action. So I don't see how that translates into a Biden victory. I don't see how Biden attacks the energy industry, particularly fracking. Even though he tried to back away from it, he didn't back away from it. He's made a lot of statements about the energy sector in America. And Pennsylvania votes for that. In Arizona, there's a 95-mile-long parade of Trump supporters, but somehow Arizona goes blue. It just doesn't add up. I mean, if there was a blue wave, I would accept that Biden won fair and square. But he didn't. There was no blue wave. The blues got pushed back on a lot of fronts. They're pissed off at each other. And I don't really understand how that translates into Biden winning. I just don't. It doesn't. When I went to bed on election night, I thought all indicators were pointing towards a Trump victory. Certain propositions in California that were telling Gavin Newsom no. Certain races, political races, were shaping up in a way that didn't look like Biden stood a chance. Mitch McConnell got back in. Lindsey Graham got back in. They did defeat some Republicans that I saw. Unfortunately, my boy Earl Weber went down here in the Los Angeles area. But other than that, I wasn't seeing a Biden victory. So it is kind of suspicious. And again, I don't believe in the mail-in ballots at all. Absentee is one thing because you apply for that. And the thing that's important about the absentees is you request them and they mail you an absentee ballot. They don't necessarily mail it on the same day. You can't just drive around the neighborhood and pick up a whole bunch of absentee ballots. Unlike a massive ballot dump like they did here in California where people are all receiving ballots and you could just go around and steal them. I don't know if that happened, but the fact that it's even a remote possibility invalidates the whole thing. And we're going to get into a little bit more in just a minute here. So this is the other point that really needs to be made. Because I saw it. I saw businesses being boarded up. The media declared Trump the winner. Look what would have happened. That's what would have happened. Violence would have erupted. Businesses would have burned. Police would have been attacked. We know this. And yet we're supposed to accept this loss even though we can see that it was tainted and possibly tainted to the point where Trump still wins. That's a remote possibility. Maybe not even remote. But we're not out rioting. We're going to the courts and we're trying to get resolution through legal means. We're not burning down Macy's. So this is why, to me, I think the whole mail-in thing was a fraud from the beginning. And to be honest, the result should be invalidated. In law, evidence is inadmissible unless it conforms to the chain of custody. So you can't use it unless it conforms to the chain of custody. Which is basically like the police officer, the detective finds something like, let's say, some blood. There's a certain procedure that must be followed. You can't take it home and then bring it back the next day. We found that out with the OJ trial. Look that up. We can't, for example, the detective can't take the swab himself, put it in a vial, take it home, and mail it to the lab. The chain of custody. You know, the CSI guy gets it. They log it. They take it to a lab. It goes from the lab to the next stop and to the next stop. And if it goes anywhere else, it's throw it out. It's worthless. The problem with this election was the ballot chain of custody was broken, from ballots flooding the streets to being returned in a manner that invited the biggest fraud in the history of our elections. That's it. Right there. See, an absentee ballot, okay, is a very specific to and from. You check up on it. You're very well aware of it. Sure, you could check up on your mail-in ballot. You could. But with so many ballots out there, signatures and identities were not confirmed. With an absentee ballot, they have all the time in the world to check your signature, check your details, and make sure that you're the one getting the ballot. And when it comes back, the same process, because they don't have as many to process. They can take those extra seconds to look at something. Unlike here, where they were just flooded. 124,000 just dumped on a table, basically. And people sort through it. Well, here's a vote, here's a vote, here's a vote. There was no chain of custody. There was none. And again, absentee ballots are generally used for people who can't vote in their area. They're not going to be there. They're in the hospital. They're bedridden. They have to work. You know? Just like a military ballot. Those are exceptions that are given every single year and have been accepted for decades. Mail-in? Mass mail-in? No. We've never done it before. It was not put to a vote. It was not put to a study. We were not, even given the opportunity to say, whoa, wait a minute here. But the Democrats, the governors especially, they slammed it through because they knew they had unenthusiastic Biden voters. And they were going to make it easy for these less than dedicated people to get their vote in. And for any kids on TikTok or any political party that wanted to pay for votes or anybody who just wanted to steal their family's vote. All of these were, whether or not they happened is immaterial. It's the possibility. You may not get burgled, but it's still a bad idea to leave your door unlocked. This is why this is so important to us. It's easy being a communist in a free country. Try being free in a communist country. This isn't about Trump Biden. This isn't about my love of Donald Trump because I like The Apprentice. No. This is squarely because he reminded us of what it was like to be proud to be Americans. And the values that we were built upon and stand for, and the fact that we confront our issues and try to fix them. Not to be led by a corrupt government. Freaking swamp. This is one of my favorites that kind of sums it up. Pretty sure it wasn't the dying wish of thousands of Americans to cast a vote 20 years after they died. But I will let you know once the mediums have finished canvassing. And good old Carpe. That's the kind of shit that actually happens. And we made it way too easy because Any dead person that received a ballot, somebody could vote with that ballot. There was a case that I heard, it came from Project Veritas, and they were interviewing an election official, and he told the story of some dumbass who was registered in 2 different areas, 2 different states, and he returned the wrong ballot in he put his Jersey ballot in his Florida envelope and his Florida ballot in his New Jersey envelope. That's, he voted twice, man. A postman was busted on the Peace Bridge with Canada. He had mail with him. I'm not exactly sure what he was doing, but it just goes to show you that chain of custody. Too much could go wrong. Glitches that were giving votes away. These are all things that we have to look into. Apparently that 6,000 votes here and 6,000 votes here were counted as Democrat even though they were Republican. They were caught, but how many were missed? Those are the kind of things that get sorted out. But when you throw all these other ballots on top, just illegitimate to me. The Democrats are suing to block observers from watching the ballots being counted. If this is even remotely true, it just goes to show you that they don't want things checked. Who knows what they did? Look, they concocted evidence to impeach the president. They've spent 4 years blaming Trump for everything and never once looking at themselves for the mess that they made. Biden was there for 47 years, man. You're putting him in charge, a guy that authored the crime bill. And Black said, sure, yeah, we got hammered in that one. Crack is way more than cocaine. We're pissed off about that. But as soon as he becomes the nominee, you're like, oh, well, we'll vote for him. Okay. Look where your convictions lie, man. Those who spent the last 4 years convinced there was an election interference are now saying there's no way the election could be rigged. See, that's the problem that I'm having with all of this, is that's what is being said. They spent 4 years saying that Trump rigged the election against Hillary, and now they're saying it couldn't be done. This is a problem in politics now that, we condemn something for 4 years and then we just do it ourselves. Like, man, we're screwed if that's the way it's going to work. I mean, both sides, but right now we're dealing with the election fraud. And here's what I was talking about with some of the fishy numbers that were coming out. If that, again, more votes than they had people, I mean, and that's the problem. Whether it's true or not, it's a distinct possibility that people easily double voted, or that people used other people's ballots to vote. And that's just, it's ludicrous that we even did it this way. This is a failed experiment. Be honest with you, I think it's a do-over and you open the polls again. One of my favorites on the subject, I see dead people. What are they doing? Voting. Again, it's made easier by mail-in ballots. Just a shotgun effect. And who is the ones that orchestrated this? The very same people that were holding off on relief for COVID because they didn't want to give Trump any sort of good publicity. But more to the point, even removing Trump from it, they're more they're holding it back because they're insisting upon checks to illegal aliens, prison reform, no bail, all kinds of other shit that has nothing to do with COVID relief. They're trying to use our suffering to their advantage. I'm sorry. If you want to say that the Republicans are giving tax breaks to multi-billion-dollar companies, that's fine. Give them money, but you'll give us money too. It's money for COVID, whether or not they need it, apparently. I could accept that over trying to tie in prison reform and illegal aliens. No brainer. But here's, another thing to blame in all of this is that the media never talked about how suspect it was. And this Bronco right here really epitomizes how the media has been working. This is the truth. The media then pretends that the guy down there with the Trump Pence sign, he's the bully. He's the racist. He's the oppressor. He should feel guilty for who he is. In reality, they're the bullies, man. They're the ones who are holding relief hostage. They're the ones who want to impose massive job loss in the energy sector. They're the ones who just want to keep people down so that every year that they need a vote, they can just say, hey, we're going to help you up. And then you vote for them, and they do nothing for you. In California, which is heavily democratically run, nothing has gotten better. Nothing. Everything is freaking going downhill. I'm sorry. Can the Republicans do better? I don't know, because we haven't seen it in so freaking long here in this state. You know, this is another thing that they covered up. The media really made sure you didn't understand this particular one. You know, again, it's Bronco. You know, right there. The black vote carried pissed off Joe Biden, while Trump is happily carrying the black vote. You see? That's the big difference. Platinum package, opportunity zones, funding for historically black colleges. You got sold a bad bill of gold. You got a sack of shit. That's what you got. Because you believe the media. You believe the influencers. You believe the stupid ass celebrities who make so much money they don't give a shit about how any of this goes because they can buy their own freedom. When the rest of us are suffering, LeBron James doesn't give a shit. What has Biden done for blacks compared to what Trump has done? But did the media let you know that? Did they point it out? No. Because they wanted the election to go one way and one way only. And now, the odd part about it is they're probably going to suffer because without Trump to talk about, the shit going to get boring. These are the people who say that we are the fascists. That say we hate. Right there. Right there. F every American, white woman, black man who supported Trump. They should burn. That's what she's promoting. Burning. And it's happened. Trump supporter has had her house burned. Yeah, I saw the video. House burned. Lady said I was a Trump supporter, and that's why they attacked my house. Okay. Yeah. Maybe it's because of shit that people like this say. You know? And this is what we're going to get. Right there. We did it, Kamala. We won the White House. Shoves them off a cliff. Because I think that's the ultimate goal. At least for the radical left, it is. Because they want like somebody who could just be completely bought and paid for. See, Joe Biden's already been bought and paid for. He owes favors to, I believe, probably the Ukrainians somehow, probably Russia, definitely China. We know that. I mean, he received loans from a Chinese business. I mean, come on. We know how this works. But my favorite one that sums up the whole thing, 2016, Russia interfered in the election. 2020, how dare you question the integrity of the election? Wow. I live in California, the 6th largest economy in the world, they like to brag, and it's a pile of fucking shit. I live in America. Most people call it the land of the free. You know, we're supposed to be setting the bar for other countries. You know, Biden's talking about getting back in the Paris Climate Accord, but we set the bar there. We did our freaking part. But we can't even have a legitimate election. Trump carried the Cuban and Venezuelan votes in Florida. And when they were asked about that, the response was quite simple. They've seen this before. They know what happens when socialists take over. And now, after this election, the stories they're telling are this is exactly how it happens when they have free elections in their native country. Overnight, ballots appear. When everybody's sleeping. You know? That's when evil creeps in, man. When everybody's asleep at night. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing that they are sneaking in. And again, I make this really based on one bit of information. There was no blue wave. So I don't think the way all the other votes went for propositions and things like that really leads to a Biden victory. Find that very hard to believe. I really do. Because America was in a really good place, and I don't know why we'd want to tamper with that. People could say whatever they want about Trump personally, but we were in a decent place. Yeah, coronavirus, but we're still going. Coronavirus wasn't something that we created. This has happened in every country. Every country's having a resurgence of it. But we were feeling good. 55% of Americans, when asked, said that they were doing better now than 4 years ago. And that is unprecedented. No other president since Reagan, when it started, has ever had that high of a rating. So again, I just don't see it. I don't believe it. And quite honestly, I'm not going to accept it. And we'll just have to see. You know, me, you, we're just going to have to see where this all leads. And I hope, and I would say I pray, that in 7 more days I have more joyous news to talk about. We'll see. Either way, man, you know, as long as they're not going to cave into the far left, we should be all right. You know, I wanted to at least leave you with that. Copious out. Keep fighting, because America's worth fighting for.